I sang a lot of different stuff, and I've never thought that I made, the most important stamp on pop music or anything like that. But what I did that was different from other people, I think, was that I sang a very diverse range of music.
Linda Ronstadt was known as the 1970s diva, with a voice as an angel and a heart, as fearless as anything you could possibly imagine. Even though her music and style got people talking, there was something else that struck a chord. With rumors, heartbreaking truths, and deep-seated revelations lurking behind the scenes, in this video, we're digging into everything you once thought you knew. The stories and scandals are nothing compared to what we're about to reveal, as Linda Ronstadt left nothing to the imagination. Try not to gasp at what you're about to find out. Linda Ronstadt spent decades at the top, serving back-to-back hits. But now, after all these years, she's finally pulling back the curtain on the secrets she's kept hidden. With the untold truth coming to light, you're about to get a front-row seat to her life, her music, and everything in between. But before we get into the events that led to these shocking revelations, we have to go back to where her love for music all began. Early stage rebellion. Before Linda Ronstadt was a name that could light up any stage, she was just a young girl from Arizona, carrying a voice too big for the small-town spaces around her. For Linda, singing wasn't just a hobby, her life depended on it, and it felt like everything else around her felt way too small to contain the emotions bubbling inside. Her passion for music wasn't something she stumbled into by accident. It was stitched into her life from the very beginning, thanks to the deep influence of her parents. Her father, Gilbert Ronstadt, ran a successful hardware business in Tucson, but his true love was music. A natural baritone with a love for traditional Mexican songs, Linda's father would often fill their home with melodies passed down through generations. Linda grew up listening to him sing boleros and rancheras, songs steeped in emotion. But it wasn't just the folk tunes that shaped her. Her mother, Ruth, also impacted Linda. Even though she focused on catering to her children and the home, Ruth made sure Linda's education included classical music. She insisted Linda learn the piano, introducing her to composers like Beethoven, Chopin, and Bach. At first, Linda didn't seem to enjoy it, but over time, it became a part of her. And it's no wonder why she'd switch genres with ease. Even as a teenager, Linda wasn't old enough to play by the rules. While most girls her age were worrying about hemlines and curfews, Linda was stepping onto tiny stages in Tucson, wearing whatever made her feel most alive. These outfits were sometimes bold, sometimes unexpected. Her voice was hard to ignore. In those early shows, it became obvious that Linda wasn't just performing songs. Every note she sang was a rebellion against being normal, a silent battle against the idea that she should just fit in and behave. She wasn't even one to back down from a fight. She wore her heart on her sleeve, and the small-town crowds didn't know whether to applaud or catch their breath. But what happens when a voice that refuses to be tamed finally finds a way to roar into the world? Stick around, because Linda's breakthrough with the Stone Ponies was about to shake up more than just a few sleepy radio stations. Her voice was the very particular thing that made her stand out. Critics would later criticize her voice, with most complimenting it and calling it almost perfect, and it wasn't far-fetched. Linda's breakthrough didn't just happen because she had a powerhouse voice. You could hear it in the way she stretched a note, the way she leaned into the heartbreak of a lyric. Linda Ronstadt wasn't just singing songs. She was telling stories that had been living in her blood long before she ever stepped on a stage. This collision of worlds didn't confuse Linda at all. She grew up understanding that music wasn't supposed to live inside neat little boxes. It could be wild and free, or structured and grand. It could make you dance, or it could leave you shattered. And sometimes, if you were really lucky, it could do both at once. Linda's voice didn't fit into any one genre because Linda herself didn't fit into any one world. She was the kind of artist you couldn't label without selling her short, and honestly, she preferred it that way. But as powerful as her musical heritage was, it wasn't enough to guarantee her a place at the table. Especially not in a world that had pretty strict ideas about what women were supposed to sound like, and even stricter ideas about what they were supposed to be. Linda was about to crash into that reality head first. And trust me, when she did, she wasn't about to apologize for it. Because next came the moment that would send her soaring, and it all started with one song and a band called the Stone Ponies. Chance at stardom, Linda Ronstadt wasn't one to dim her light. So when she packed up her dreams and left Tucson for the chaos of Los Angeles at just 18 years old, she wasn't chasing fame, but she didn't have a master plan. What she had was a voice, a battered guitar, and a stubborn fire that wouldn't let her quit. At first, LA was overwhelming. It was so loud, fast, and messy. But it didn't take long for Linda to find a lifeline. Bobby Kimmel, an old family friend already in the city, introduced her to musician Kenny Edwards, and the three of them started jamming in living rooms and tiny coffee houses. That's how the Stone Ponies were born, and it was not out of some slick industry scheme, but out of friendship, grit, and the pure love of making music. It was magic almost from the start. But the real lightning struck when Linda stepped up to the mic and sang Different Drum. The song, written by Mike Nesmith, wasn't her own, but you wouldn't have known it because of how she carried each note with her beautiful voice. The way Linda sang it made it feel like she was tearing pages straight from her own diary, handing them to the crowd one trembling, beautiful word at a time. The song blew up practically overnight. Linda Ronstadt was suddenly that girl whose voice people couldn't get over. But as Linda would soon find out, standing out in a man's world didn't just win you applause, it also made you a target. And surviving that? Well, that was going to take more than just an incredible voice. By the late 1960s, Linda Ronstadt was already getting her first taste of real fame. Different Drum had shot up the charts, and the Stone Ponies were suddenly everywhere, on the radio, in magazines, on stages packed with screaming fans. For a girl who had just left Tucson a few years earlier, it was the kind of dream that almost didn't feel real. From there, her career took off. She was recognized as an excellent singer and was already making a name for herself, especially because their breakout hit, Different Drum, topped the Billboard Hot 100 chart, reaching the 13th spot. This was enough to her and the band as a force in the industry. While they made a mark, they didn't attain a significant amount of success they had envisioned. With the slow progress, Linda started to feel as though this wasn't what she wanted anymore. Of course, she loved the music and the band, but the truth was, she wanted more. She didn't just want to be a lead voice in the group. In 1968, right after the rush of Different Drum, she made the call most people wouldn't have dared to make. She stepped away from the Stone Ponies. The next year, in 1969, Linda dropped her first solo album, Hand-Sewn, Homegrown. It wasn't what the industry was expecting, not even close. Instead of chasing another pop hit, Linda leaned into the music she loved, even though she felt like it was rough around the edges. It didn't fit neatly into any radio format, and it didn't sound like anything a female artist had done before. At first, the record labels didn't know what to do with her. Was she into country music? Or was it rock or pop? The answer was yes and no. She wanted to do whatever she wanted, and that didn't sit well with a lot of them. especially because they thought they knew how music was supposed to work. She still did her thing regardless of what anyone thought, and it didn't take long as she made her mark. Her 1974 album, Heart Like a Wheel, became a massive success, earning her her first Grammy Award for Best Country Vocal Performance, solidifying her status as a powerhouse in the music world. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few decades, Linda would go on to win 11 Grammy Awards in several categories, ranging from pop to country to Latin music. Not only that, in 1989, she won the Grammy Award for Best Pop Vocal Performance for Trio, alongside Dolly Parton and Emmylou Harris. This achievement led to some of her songs being featured in movies and TV shows. Even with her achievements, she struggled to handle it alone, but regardless of it all, she didn't back down. If anything, they got her to her peak. But little did the world know the next time she came around, she wouldn't just be crashing into the boys' club. Linda's bold choices. By the mid-1970s, Linda Ronstadt had already made her mark as one of the most distinctive voices in music. But she wasn't content with just being known for her talent. She was about to shake things up by taking control of how the world saw her. She didn't shy away from making bold fashion choices, and interestingly enough, she didn't do it for shock value, though. For Linda, it was all about taking ownership of her image. She once said, "I'm not a mannequin for record companies. If I'm going to be looked at, it'll be on my terms." She knew that in a male-dominated industry, her choices would make waves, but she didn't care. It was her body, her rules. One moment that really turned heads was her appearance on the cover of Rolling Stone in 1960. There she was, wearing nothing but a skimpy red slip and knee-high socks. Fans, critics, and the press were floored. People gasped, and some even judged her for it, calling it too daring. But Linda wasn't interested in fitting into anyone's expectations. What's wild is how different it was from the male rock stars of the time. When men stripped down on stage or in photo shoots, it was seen as bold and rebellious. But when Linda did the same thing, it sparked controversy. It was the kind of double standard that only a woman in her position could experience. But that's what made Linda so powerful. She didn't back down from the scrutiny. She used vulnerability as her strength, making her own rules in a world that tried to box her in. And that confidence made her even more unstoppable. What the world didn't know was that this bold move was just the beginning. Her next step, well, that was going to leave them speechless. Love, loss, and the price of fame. Linda Ronstadt's personal life was as much a part of her public image as her music, even though it's not always in the ways she'd hoped. Her love life wasn't just about who she was dating. It became another chapter of her story that both intrigued and sometimes haunted her. Her relationship with producer John Boylan was a perfect example. They weren't just lovers, they were collaborators, working side by side on her music. But mixing business with pleasure doesn't always work out the way you expect. The two eventually moved in together, hoping that their bond could withstand both the personal and professional sides of their relationship. But, as it often goes, living together only revealed what their passionate romance had hidden: their differences. After a quick breakup, Linda admitted that their cohabitation had brought out the incompatibilities neither had seen before. Still, they remained professionals, continuing to respect each other's work even after the romantic flames had cooled. But as one relationship ended, another one began. Linda's romance with California Governor Jerry Brown felt unreal. The pair made an unusual but captivating couple, drawing attention from every corner of the media. At the height of their relationship, whispers began to circulate. Could she be America's future First Lady? People were watching, and not just for her music. Linda had stepped into a completely new spotlight, balancing her music career with the unofficial duties that came with being the governor's partner. It was a side of fame she hadn't quite expected, but one that would shape her in ways she couldn't have predicted. At the height of Linda Ronstadt's fame, when she had the world at her feet and fans screaming her name from coast to coast, she began to share a side of her life that no one expected. Behind the glitz, behind the flashing lights, there was a loneliness so deep it felt almost unexplainable. The kind of loneliness that doesn't go away after the final encore or when the applause fades into the night. In a rare and candid moment, Linda opened up about it, saying, "They haven't invented a word for that kind of loneliness you feel when you're on the road." It wasn't just the isolation of being away from home. It was the emptiness that came after a show, when the crowds had gone home and she was left alone in her dressing room. The adoration of thousands didn't fill the space, didn't drown out the silence. Linda didn't fall victim to the substance abuse that was rampant in the rock scene of the 70s, but she wasn't immune to the emotional toll of the lifestyle. The constant touring, the long stretches away from family and friends took its toll on her. While others in the music world were using substances to cope with the pressures of fame, Linda found herself battling an emotional fatigue that went far beyond anything that could be numbed or forgotten. For Linda, the price of fame wasn't just in what she gave to her fans, but in what she lost of herself in the process. And while she grappled with loneliness, there was one more challenge ahead, one that would forever change the course of her life. It wasn't just the emotional highs and lows, it was the physical toll that would eventually catch up with her. But before we dive into that, we need to understand just how deeply the loneliness of fame cut into her soul. After years of touring alone, doing almost everything on her own, facing loneliness and struggling emotionally, Linda realized she needed a stronger support system, both musically and emotionally. She knew she couldn't carry the burden of her career by herself anymore. So, she started seeking out real collaborators with the idea of finding someone she could rely on. Could she find one? And what was the outcome of it? Breaking through with collaboration. After all the high-profile romances, the painful breakups, and the overwhelming loneliness of the road, Linda was ready for something different. The fame and adoration she'd long craved had come, but with it, a deep sense of emptiness. She had everything except the peace she thought it would bring. Luckily for her, that's when she stumbled across Peter Asher, the collaborator who would change everything. Peter wasn't like the others. He wasn't looking to control her sound or fit her into a neat little box for the record companies. Instead, he listened, and that made all the difference. For the first time in her career, Linda found someone who understood her need for creative freedom without the pressure to conform. They not only worked on music together, they created something raw and authentic that led to a string of hits that defined a new era for Linda, including the unforgettable Silver Threads and Golden Needles and Don't Cry Now, both of which marked massive commercial success. But even as the accolades poured in, Linda couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. Has learned that success doesn't automatically bring happiness. It was as if the more she achieved, the more she realized that the emptiness she'd tried to fill with fame and recognition wasn't going away. She had everything except the one thing she had always wanted, which was peace of mind. In a way, the very collaboration that brought her to new heights also marked the beginning of her next realization. She was doing so well for herself, but that wasn't enough to shake off what she had been feeling. This bittersweet understanding would become more clear in the years that followed, and soon, Linda would find herself once again redefining her life and music. But for now, she had Peter Asher by her side, and with him, the promise of a creative renaissance she had long been yearning for. As Linda embraced her new success, a new chapter awaited. Yet, even with her newfound success, the question remained: could collaboration truly fill the void she felt inside? Challenges in a man's world. As Linda's career progressed, so did the realization that her success wasn't just about her talents. She also faced gender discrimination in an industry where she was making a name for herself. Back in the 1970s, the industry had been dominated by men who had underestimated the fact that Linda was not just a pretty face, especially because she didn't just want to be seen as the girl singer who could hold a note. She had to prove herself deserving of her place in the industry. The constant battle was exhausting. She had to fight for credibility at every turn, not only with the press and the public, but also with her colleagues. Men in the industry admired her, sure, but there was always a hint of rivalry below the surface. The respect she deserved wasn't just given, and it felt like she kept proving herself over and over again. But it wasn't all rivalry. There were moments of admiration, too. One woman in particular, Maria Muldaur, became someone Linda really admired. Maria made sure not to sacrifice her artistic integrity while being fully feminine, which Linda found strange. She saw how Muldaur carried herself with grace and confidence, not letting her femininity be tarnished in that male-dominated space. Linda tried to emulate that same balance, but found it nearly impossible. The more she tried to fit in, the more it seemed like she had to choose between being a woman or being an artist, and never both at the same time. The struggle was real, but it was more than just trying to find her path. She constantly had to deal with the world's expectations of her as a woman, a rock star, and everything in between. As Linda pushed forward in her career, she shockingly made a move and a decision that left questions unanswered for most fans. Personal life. As Linda Ronstadt had spent the 1980s and early 1990s shaping the music scene, fighting her way through the industry, life had a way of pulling her in a different direction. Sooner than later, she took a step away from singing, and in 1990, Linda made a decision that would shift the trajectory of her life in ways no album or tour could. She decided she was going to adopt. After adopting 2 children and becoming a single mother without a husband, there was a profound emotional shift for Linda. She decided to start a family and embrace the role of a mother. This new chapter was finally the moment she needed to invest her time and heart into, and it was everything she didn't think she needed. As she became a mother, Linda found a new kind of strength. Not only did she decide to leave the career she built, but she also made a huge move from Los Angeles back to Tucson, Arizona, where she started. Being here was everything she needed to get the peace of mind she's been wanting, and also time away from the hustle and bustle. Health challenges. While she made the most shocking moves all through her life, one shocking piece of news that popped up was the news of her health. The singer had been dealing with a series of health issues for years before she received her official diagnosis. It started off with minor symptoms like tremors, balance issues, and problems with her coordination, which she initially brushed off as part of aging or just a normal result of a life lived on the road. But as time went on, these issues worsened, and she began having trouble with basic things like walking and even swallowing. It became clear that something more serious was at play, and the situation was only getting worse. In 2011, while she was still struggling with these physical challenges, Linda was working on a project, an album of Mexican folk songs titled Canciones de mi Padre. But as her symptoms worsened, It became more difficult to perform the physical tasks needed for recording, and the process was draining her in ways she hadn't anticipated. At this point, Linda had been quietly enduring the symptoms, but the limitations she was facing started affecting her ability to sing, which was what she loved most. Her voice was her power, and it felt like something was slipping away from her. She finally decided to see a doctor, but the process of getting a diagnosis wasn't immediate. It took several tests, doctor visits, and a few months of uncertainty before the doctors gave her the initial Parkinson's diagnosis. However, as they continued to investigate her symptoms, they realized it wasn't Parkinson's at all, but rather progressive supranuclear palsy, PSP, a far rarer and more aggressive neurological condition. This diagnosis came as a heavy blow. At the time, she was in the midst of her music career, still engaged in the work that had brought her joy and fulfillment. But the toll that her declining health took on her ability to perform, combined with the emotional impact of the diagnosis, forced her to confront a reality she hadn't anticipated. Her music career, as she knew it, was coming to an end. Linda Ronstadt has been open about her health struggles and how they have affected her life. Over the years, she's shared several anecdotes and updates, particularly about her battle with progressive supranuclear palsy, PSP, and how it's impacted her career and personal life. One of the most poignant moments came when she admitted to The New Yorker in 2019 that the hardest part of her diagnosis was the loss of her singing voice. This vulnerability about her condition showed just how much music had defined her identity and how deeply the loss of her voice affected her. In another interview, she described the slow, painful process of realizing that something was seriously wrong with her health. She said she knew something was off when she started having trouble doing simple things like zipping up her coat or tying her shoes. The tremors and lack of coordination were alarming, but she initially pushed them aside, assuming they were just a part of aging. But the realization hit her when she noticed how challenging it was to sing, something that had come so naturally to her for decades. Linda also shared that, during her decline, she had to rely on others to help her with daily tasks. It was difficult for someone who had always been fiercely independent and used to performing at the highest level. The disease progressively took away her physical strength and coordination, but it couldn't take away the memories of the music she created or the profound impact she had on her fans. Though Linda has largely stepped away from the public eye since her diagnosis, she continues to advocate for awareness of PSP and other neurological conditions. She has shared that, despite the challenges, she remains in good spirits, focusing on her family and the joy that still comes from her memories of a life filled with music. Her legacy. Linda Ronstadt's legacy is more than just the sum of her hits. It's a reflection of the depth of her soul and the indomitable spirit she carried with her, even as she faced the devastating loss of her voice. Over a career that spanned more than 5 decades, Linda became a trailblazer who defied expectations, blending genres and pushing boundaries. She didn't just make music, she reshaped it, changing the way we listen and experience sound. But Linda's legacy extends far beyond her massive influence in the music industry. While she garnered countless accolades, 11 Grammy Awards, an induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and more than 30 million albums sold, it wasn't the awards or commercial success that truly defined her strength. No, her strength was in the way she faced the most profound loss anyone could imagine: the loss of her voice. She didn't retreat into bitterness or let the disease define her. Instead, she approached it with grace, humor, and acceptance, choosing to live fully despite the pain. Her story continues to inspire, seen in the outpouring of tributes and biopics that honor her impact. From Linda Ronstadt, The Sound of My Voice, a critically acclaimed documentary that offers an intimate look at her journey. To the tribute albums by artists who were deeply influenced by her sound, Linda's influence lives on. Her work has been celebrated by the next generation of musicians and fans who continue to feel the raw emotion in her voice, even in its absence. In 2019, Linda received a Lifetime Achievement Grammy Award, cementing her place in music history as not just a performer, but as a trailblazer who redefined what it means to be an artist. Even though she might not be able to hit the notes she used to, she's made her mark in the music industry. What are your rights on some of her work? And were the revelations on her health surprising? Beyond the accolades and tributes, Linda's legacy also lives through her advocacy work and fearless cultural pride. She openly celebrated her Mexican heritage at a time when it wasn't always embraced in mainstream America, releasing Canciones de mi Padre, the best-selling non-English language album in U.S. history. Her willingness to honor her roots helped pave the way for greater representation of Latin music and artists in the broader industry. In every stage of her life, Linda Ronstadt proved that true artistry is about more than just talent. It's about authenticity, resilience, and using your platform to lift others up. Let me know what you think in the comments. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. For more content like this, click on the next video on your screen.